Hello, Chicago.
President Barack Obama made a promise when he was first elected to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it looks like he's going to keep it. In his first term, he withdrew remaining US forces from Iraq, and by the end of his second term, he told graduates at the West Point Military Academy on Wednesday, there will be no American troops left in Afghanistan.
And at the end of this year, a new Afghan president will be in office. And America's combat mission will be over.
It is a far cry from where Barack Obama began his term in office in 2009. It's also a far cry from the course that his predecessor, George W. Bush, charted just 12 years ago at his famous, some would say infamous, commencement address also at West Point, where Bush proclaimed his doctrine of global preemption.
A military that must be ready to strike at a moment's notice in any dark corner of the world. And our security require all Americans to be forward-looking and resolute, to be ready for preemptive action when necessary to defend our liberty and to defend our lives.
But even President Obama has taken a long journey to reach this point. Early in his first term, the Nobel Committee awarded him the Nobel Prize for Peace, the first time it had awarded the prize based on future rather than past performance. Well, President Obama is finally delivering, but at the time, he shocked many in the audience in Oslo with a speech that was more about his duties as US Commander-in-Chief than his hopes for world peace.
We are at war. Now, I'm responsible for the deployment of thousands of young Americans to battle in a distant land. And some will kill, and some will be killed. And so I come here with an acute sense of the costs of armed conflict, filled with difficult questions about the relationship between war and peace and our effort to replace one with the other.
Things have come full circle. On Wednesday, President Obama made it very clear that it would take a great deal for him to order American military boots on the ground anywhere in the world during his remaining 2.5 years in office. Although he proclaimed America was still the indispensable nation, and he said he himself was an American exceptionalist, Mr. Obama laid out a foreign policy vision that was centered far more on diplomatic engagement than on wars of choice, which was what he originally called the Iraq War, or indeed on wars of necessity, which is how he described Afghanistan. Both were now over.
So the United States is and remains the one indispensable nation. But to say that we have an interest in pursuing peace and freedom beyond our borders is not to say that every problem has a military solution.
President Obama's conservative critics will doubtless have a field day in dissecting his West Point speech and pointing out the absence of big red lines on Putin's Russia or on an increasingly assertive China in the South China Sea. But Mr. Obama's version of American foreign policy light will certainly chime with the mood amongst the American public, which tired of wars and foreign adventures a long time ago.
Issues of global concern do not pose a direct threat to the United States. When such issues are at stake, when crises arise that stir our conscience or push the world in a more dangerous direction, but do not directly threaten us, then the threshold for military action must be higher.
This is Edward Luce for Luce Talk at the Financial Times in Washington, D.C.